Here is a grocery run that probably sounds familiar. You head to the store without a clear plan. You pick up things that look good or feel like they might be useful. You get home with 2 or 3 bags, spend a bit more than you meant to, and feel reasonably satisfied about it. Then, 6 days later, there is a wilted bunch of parsley in the back of the crisper drawer, half a cucumber that did not quite make it, a container of yogurt from last week, and the tail end of some roasted vegetables you kept meaning to eat. And they all go in the bin. This is not a personal failing. It is just what happens when there is no real system behind the shopping. And it costs more than most people realize. Studies on food waste consistently show that the average Western household throws away somewhere between a quarter and a third of the food it brings home. When you work that out across a full year, it is hundreds of dollars that did not get eaten. Just gone. What is interesting is that Scandinavian households throw away significantly less, not because they have more willpower or more time in the kitchen or some special relationship with vegetables. It is because a handful of quiet, practical habits have been passed down through Nordic culture for generations. Habits that treat the kitchen not as a place you improvise in, but as something you manage with a little intention. One of those habits, the one we are counting down to at number 1, is so simple it almost sounds too obvious to bother with. And yet, most kitchens in the West never actually do it. Once you try it once, you will probably do it every week without thinking. These are 9 Scandinavian spending habits that keep their kitchens stocked without the waste. Number 9. They build the shopping list from a meal plan, not from memory. The Scandinavian approach to the weekly shop typically starts a day or two before the store visit, not in the parking lot, but at the kitchen table. The question is not simply, what do we need? The question is, what are we eating this week? Those sound similar, but they lead to very different baskets. When you shop from memory or habit, you restock things out of familiarity and buy what seems like it could be useful later. A bag of baby spinach with no dinner planned around it. A nice piece of fish for a night you are not quite sure exists. Some interesting sauce that felt worth having. These are the items that end up getting lost in the fridge because they never had a specific job waiting for them. When you shop from even a rough meal plan, 4 or 5 dinners sketched out for the week, every item in your basket has a purpose. The potatoes are for Wednesday's fish stew. The rye bread is for packed lunches. The eggs are for Sunday morning and also for the frittata on Thursday. Nothing is floating around without somewhere to land. The other benefit is that a meal plan naturally prevents doubling up. If potatoes are already on the menu midweek, you will not also grab pasta for that same night. The structure keeps the basket leaner and the fridge more organized. 10 minutes on a Sunday, that is the full investment. And in exchange, your week of eating almost runs itself. Number 8, they buy whole ingredients instead of pre-cut convenience versions. Walk through a Nordic supermarket, and the pre-cut, pre-washed, ready-to-go section exists, but it is not where Scandinavian shoppers spend much time. The default reach is for the whole cabbage, the full block of cheese, the unpeeled carrots still tied in a bunch. And the reasons go beyond price, though price matters. Whole vegetables last significantly longer than their pre-cut counterparts. A whole red cabbage can sit in the fridge for 3 or 4 weeks and still be perfectly crisp. Pre-shredded cabbage in a bag has a much shorter window before it starts to look tired and smell off. A full block of hard cheese, cut from as needed, outlasts sliced cheese in a packet by a considerable margin. Buying whole also gives you flexibility that pre-cut never can. That head of broccoli becomes florets for a stir-fry one night, stems for a soup the next, and the very last bits for a broth on the weekend. A pre-cut bag of broccoli florets gives you 1 option. The whole head gives you 3. You control the shape, the size, the use, and the timing. The upfront cost is a good knife and a few extra minutes. The return is more uses from each ingredient, a longer fridge life, noticeably less waste, and almost always a lower price per portion. It is one of the simplest swaps on this list and one of the most immediately effective. Number 7. They keep the pantry stocked with things that never expire. Root vegetables and dried staples have been the backbone of the Scandinavian kitchen for centuries. Potatoes, carrots, parsnips, turnips, beets, onions, dried lentils, barley, split peas, rolled oats, rye flour. These ingredients store easily for weeks or months, cost very little, and can be turned into hundreds of different meals, depending on what else is available. A cool, dark storage spot for root vegetables is a feature of Nordic homes that goes back generations, not out of nostalgia, but out of pure practicality. These are not the exciting parts of the kitchen. They are the reliable parts. The part that means dinner is never actually an emergency. When the fridge is looking sparse, when the week ran away and the shopping did not happen, when the fresh section has been depleted, the root vegetables and the dried staples are still there. A pot of lentil soup with caramelized onions, a simple potato gratin with whatever soft cheese is left, barley with roasted carrots and a drizzle of something bright. These are real dinners, not emergency rations dressed up with apologies. Scandinavians do not treat these ingredients as a backup or a fallback. They treat them as the foundation the kitchen is built on. Everything else in the fridge is variable and time-sensitive. These stay constant. And that constancy is what makes the kitchen feel stocked and ready, even when the fresh section is getting low. Number 6. They use frozen fish and frozen produce without a second thought. The assumption that fresh is always better runs deep in Western cooking culture. It is treated almost as a moral preference, something that signals care and quality. Scandinavians, particularly in Norway and Sweden, where fishing has always been woven into daily life, have always had a more practical view of this. Fish that is flash frozen on the boat the same day it is caught is, by most meaningful measures, fresher than fish that has been on ice in a transport truck and sitting in a display case for 3 days. The freshness is locked in at the source. What you defrost is what came off the water. The same logic applies to frozen peas, berries, broad beans, corn, and spinach. These are frozen at peak ripeness, often within hours of harvest. The nutritional content is largely intact. They cost less than the fresh versions, and they do not expire while you are trying to figure out a plan for them because they are sitting in the freezer, waiting patiently until you need them. Scandinavian kitchens treat fresh and frozen as a parallel system, not a hierarchy. Fresh for what you are cooking today and tomorrow. Frozen for everything beyond that horizon. You pull out exactly what the recipe needs, and the rest stays perfect for next week. There is no racing against a rapidly closing window, no slightly guilty awareness of something wilting in the crisper. The freezer is not where food goes to be forgotten. It is where food waits to be useful. Number 5. They cook from what is already there before they shop for new things. Before a weekly shop, the Scandinavian habit is to open the fridge and the pantry and actually look at what is in there. Not a guilt trip inventory, just a practical scan. What is getting close to the end of its life? What was cooked earlier this week and still needs eating? What ingredients have been sitting there with no particular plan attached to them yet? Then, that day's dinner, and maybe the next day's lunch, gets built around those things. Not as a compromise or a consolation, as the obvious, sensible move. This prevents the very common situation where you go shopping with a still reasonably full fridge, layer new food on top of old food, and spend the following 10 days in a slow-motion race against a wave of expiry dates you cannot quite outrun. When you cook from what is there first, you arrive at the shop with a genuinely clear kitchen. The new groceries come home to an organized space where everything can be seen and used, not buried under the remnants of last Tuesday. It also, over time, makes you a more adaptable cook. When you cannot rely on having exactly the right ingredient for a specific recipe, you start to understand what ingredients actually do, rather than just what they are called. A wilting leek and some leftover chicken and a few potatoes becomes a brothy stew. An almost empty bag of rice and 2 eggs becomes fried rice with a little soy and sesame. You start cooking by logic and instinct rather than by strict instruction, which turns out to be a more useful skill to have in the long run. Number 4. They treat bread seriously and waste almost none of it. This one tends to surprise people. In a culture built partly around knäckebröd, the Swedish crisp bread that essentially never goes stale in the conventional sense, there has always been a practical respect for bread as an ongoing ingredient rather than a perishable with a narrow window. But even in households that eat regular soft bread every day, the attitude is the same. Bread that has gone past its freshest day is not bread that gets thrown away. It becomes toast, which many people actually prefer to fresh bread for certain things. It becomes croutons, cut into cubes, dried in the oven and stored for a salad or a creamy soup. It gets grated into breadcrumbs and frozen in a bag to be pulled out for coating fish or topping a gratin later on. In Denmark, slightly stale dark rye bread is the traditional base for ulebrød, a simple warm porridge made with beer or water and a little sugar that is deeply comforting and costs almost nothing to put together. What starts as bread that might otherwise have been binned becomes a proper breakfast or a quiet dinner on a gray winter evening. The principle behind all of this is not strict frugality for its own sake. It is a recognition that bread you bought and paid for still has value past its peak fresh window. That window is just for eating it one way. The next window is for eating it a different way. Once you start thinking about bread like this, you notice that an entire category of kitchen waste quietly disappears, and you end up making better croutons than you could buy in a bag anyway. Number 3. They use scraps deliberately, not accidentally. After a roast chicken in a Scandinavian home, the carcass does not go straight into the bin. It goes into a pot with cold water, half an onion, a few peppercorns, a bay leaf if there is one, and whatever vegetable odds and ends are already in the fridge. An hour on a low, quiet simmer, and there is a liter or 2 of proper, homemade chicken broth, the kind you would pay several dollars for in a supermarket carton. Vegetable scraps follow the same logic. Carrot peels, onion skins, the tough outer leaves of a leek, the woody ends of celery stalks, the stems of soft herbs. In many Nordic kitchens, these go into a bag or a container kept in the freezer. When there is enough, they become broth. When there is not enough yet, they are still stored, still waiting, not wasted. What this habit represents is a shift in how you think about the full value of what you paid for at the store. You paid for the whole carrot. Using the carrot and throwing away the peel means you did not quite get full value from it. Using the peel as well means you did. A bag of carrots, approached this way, feeds you across more meals, more dishes, and more days than the same bag approached without this mindset. The compound effect of that, applied every week across a year, adds up to something genuinely significant. Starting this habit costs about 30 seconds. Put a bag in the freezer and begin collecting scraps the next time you cook. That is the entire entry point. The rest follows naturally from there. Number 2. They cook extra on purpose and plan to eat it. Scandinavians do not treat leftovers as a byproduct of cooking too much by accident. They treat them as the point of cooking in the first place. When a pot of soup goes on the stove, it is sized to cover 2 dinners, not 1. When vegetables get roasted for tonight's meal, twice as many go on the tray because tomorrow's lunch is already handled. When a grain like barley or farro gets cooked, a large batch goes in the pot because it will become the base of 3 different things across the week, each one slightly different. This habit has roots in the Nordic tradition of husmanskost, wholesome home cooking that is designed to stretch and sustain rather than impress. The goal is not culinary variety for its own sake every single night. The goal is a kitchen that functions efficiently and feeds everyone well without requiring many extra decisions, extra trips to the shop, or extra money spent on lunch out, because there was nothing ready at home. The small but important detail that makes this work is deciding at cooking time, not after. You make the extra portion deliberately, with intention. You store it immediately in a visible, easy-to-reach spot in the fridge, so it is the obvious first choice the following day. Not buried in the back behind other containers, right there, ready to go. That takes about 30 seconds of intention at the end of cooking, and it means the next time you are standing in the kitchen at noon wondering what to eat, the answer is already there, already paid for, with nothing extra to cook. Number 1. They do a clear-out before every shop. This is the habit that holds everything else together, and it is strikingly simple. Once a week, before the next grocery run, Scandinavian households do a deliberate pass through the kitchen. The fridge, the pantry shelves, the fruit bowl, the freezer. Not a deep reorganization, just a clear-eyed, honest look. What is close to the end of its life? What needs to be eaten today or tomorrow rather than waiting? What is already cooked and sitting there? What has been at the back of the shelf for a bit too long? And then they cook from those things first. Dinner before the shop is whatever needs using. Maybe it is a soup pulled together from soft carrots and wilting spinach and a handful of lentils. Maybe it is pasta with the last of a jar of tomato sauce and whatever cheese is left to grate on top. Maybe it is a very simple plate of roasted root vegetables and a fried egg. Simple, satisfying, and nothing got thrown away. This clears the kitchen before new food comes in. The new groceries arrive into a clean, organized space where everything has room to be seen, reached for, and actually used. Nothing gets buried under the remnants of last week's shop. Nothing gets forgotten until it is too late. It also means you go to the store with genuine clarity about what you actually need. Not a vague sense of the kitchen's contents, but real knowledge of what is there and what is not. That precision makes the shop faster, cheaper, and more useful. You buy what the next week actually calls for, not what you might vaguely think you are running low on. In Sweden and Denmark, this is not a special routine or a productivity trick. It is just how the kitchen works. The shop is the last step in the week's food cycle, not the first. Clear out the kitchen, then shop. That sequence, as quiet and obvious as it sounds, is one of the most effective shifts you can make if you want to spend less on food without feeling like you are cutting back on anything at all. All of these habits share the same thread. The kitchen rewards a little intention. Not more time or more effort, just a slightly more deliberate approach to what comes in, what gets used, and in what order. That shift does not feel like frugality. It feels like a kitchen that finally works the way it should. If you want more calm, practical ideas from how Scandinavians live and spend, subscribe. There is a lot more coming.